Some of you may have clicked on this video expecting an examination of the famous Reich Chancellery in Berlin, the monumental building on Wilhelmstrasse from where Hitler ruled Germany and half of Europe, and which ended up by 1945 a bomb and shell-ravaged ruin. That building is long gone, blown up by the Soviets in 1949, and the rubble long since cleared away. It was rumoured for some time that some of it still survived. Rumours abounded for decades that red marble salvaged from the Reich Chancellery ruins following its demolition was recycled into newer buildings in Berlin. The marble that lines the Mohrenstrasse U-Bahn station on Wilhelmstrasse was long rumoured to have originated inside the Reich Chancellery, but scientific tests and documentation refute this. Also, these huge stylized flags of the Soviet War Memorial in Treptow Park in Berlin were long alleged to have been faced with red marble taken from the Reich Chancellery. In fact, they are faced with red granite that has no connection to the Nazi building whatsoever. This video is in fact about the other Reich Chancellery, the one most people haven't even heard of. The Little Reich Chancellery, outside the Bavarian town of Berchtesgaden. This Alpine-style building that served a very important purpose in the governance of Nazi Germany before and during World War II. Hitler spent so much time each year before the war at his private house at the Obersalzberg above Berchtesgaden, usually 6 months per year, that it made the smooth running of government very difficult. Atop this mountain, Hitler maintained in effect a private gated community where his private secretary Martin Bormann and head of the Luftwaffe Hermann Göring had houses close by, along with Hitler's trusted architect Albert Speer. The private village also contained a large SS barracks, various guest houses to accommodate the military and civilian visitors that came to see Hitler, a kindergarten for the children of staff and Nazi leaders, tea houses, and a farm. What it could not accommodate were the various ministries of state, all housed in large buildings in Berlin, the most important of which, of course, was the Reich Chancellery, the administrative headquarters of the Third Reich. So whilst the Führer was in residence, a second seat of government was built down the mountain, outside Berchtesgaden, the village of Stangas. Constructed in traditional Bavarian style between 1936 and 1937, the complex consists of a very large wood and concrete chalet, looking to all intents and purposes like a large Alpine hotel. The Reich Chancellery in Berlin would send a small administrative staff down to this complex when Hitler came to his house at the Obersalzberg, allowing the Berlin ministries to be in close contact with the centre of power via this outstation, and enabling faster and smoother cooperation with the ministries in Berlin. During the war, Hitler was also intermittently at his mountain home, and the carefully guarded small Reich Chancellery, only a 15-minute drive down the mountain from Hitler's house, functioned as intended. The main civil servant in residence at the Chancellery when Hitler was at the Berghof was Dr. Hans Lammers, head of the Reich Chancellery organization. The administrative head of the complex was Dr. Willy Meerwald of the Reich Chancellery's Department A. Hitler himself visited this collection of buildings on occasion, and 2 further structures stood behind the building, these being large Alpine chalets for Hitler's military chiefs, as he moved between his various headquarters. One large house belonged to Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. This house is original and is currently used as an insurance company headquarters. The second house was for Colonel General Alfred Jodl, Chief of the Operations Staff. This house is a modern reconstruction, the original having been razed in the early 2000s. As the war progressed, and as Germany became more and more vulnerable to Allied air attacks, it was necessary to protect the workers at this building, and along with all the other Nazi buildings around the Berchtesgaden area and the Obersalzberg, a large amount of tunnelling was constructed beneath it to create bunkers. Constructed between 1943 and 45 were 500 metres of underground passages and rooms, all intact today. The bunker system still has 2 exits beyond the complex, a secondary exit in the hillside behind the main building, and another exit in a railway cutting adjacent to the nearby railway line. Staff at the Little Reich Chancellery oversaw 125 new laws and regulations during Hitler's visits to Obersalzberg between 1937 and 1944. And in fact, the head of the Reich Chancellery, Dr. Lammers, remains in Berchtesgaden today. At war's end, Lammers encouraged Hermann Göring to send his now infamous telegram to Hitler in his Berlin bunker, stating that he would take over the reins of power as the Führer was obviously unable to effectively govern Germany from a concrete hole in the ground. Martin Bormann spun Göring's telegram as treason, resulting in the Reichsmarschall and his family and Dr. Lammers being arrested by the SS on Bormann's order and held under house arrest at Göring's house on the Obersalzberg. Lammers was later released and captured by the Americans. His wife and one of his daughters committed suicide at Obersalzberg in early May 1945. And Lammers was tried at the minister's trial at Nuremberg in 1949, receiving a 20-year prison sentence for war crimes, though this was later reduced to 10 years, and he was released early on the orders of the Americans in 1951. Lammers died in Düsseldorf in 1962, but today is buried with his wife and daughter at Berchtesgaden Cemetery. The reason why the Little Reich Chancellery is still standing today is because the entire Berchtesgaden area was taken over for the use of the occupying US Army after the war, which was happy to use the well-built Nazi structures which had survived, which were easily adapted for their own use. The Reich Chancellery complex became the headquarters of the Armed Forces Recreation Center until 1995. That year, the US Army returned all the Nazi buildings in the Berchtesgaden area to the Bavarian government, and the Little Reich Chancellery was eventually sold 10 years later, in 2005, and redeveloped into apartments. This makes visiting the complex, well, complex, because it is not a museum, although there was talk in the interim period between its return from the US Army and development into housing that it might have been turned into a museum, which probably would have been a very good idea. The occupants today are less than enthusiastic about visitors, despite the 2008 installation of a notice board at the entrance explaining the history of the place. It was a quiet, rainy afternoon when I racked up. Nobody was about, so I had a walk around the exterior. The striking features of the complex is not just how extremely unchanged it is from the Nazi era, but also the survival of this massive stone national eagle over the main entrance. The swastika held in its claws was tastefully excised just after the war on American orders, and it leaves you in no doubt as to the importance of this building in the past. There are, of course, a lot of films and photographs of the interior of this building taken when the complex was empty in the early 2000s. When I tried the main door, it was, of course, locked. How much of the original interior fixtures and fittings have remained since it has been redeveloped, we don't know. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.